So anyway, I was asked while I was still in Germany what sometimes they want a topic suggested. I usually just try to speak or say whatever comes out, but for this morning I was asked to give a topic so that it could be announced, so that all of you would know what you were to expect. Of course, you can never know what to expect, so see what comes out. Anyway, it's supposed to be on the 4 Brahmaviharas, or as was translated as the 4 wholesome emotion. Maybe give a little bit of a literal translation. You know the word Brahma? Brahma is the Brahma realms, the realms beyond the sensory heavens. Remember, in Buddhist cosmology we have the various realms, I suppose in other cosmologies as well, but the Buddha explained them quite detailedly. So we got various heaven realms, progressively more refined, all the way up to the control freak realm. You know what the control freak realm is? No? The highest heaven realm, where there is still sensory experience, in other words, sensory or sensual in the sense of sight, sound, smell, taste and touch, so where beings still derive their pleasure from the world of the 5 senses of seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. The highest of those heaven realms is the para-nimitta vasavati realm. And para means other, nimitta means the sign or the creation. So it's the beings that delight in the creation of others, or that control the creation of others. So in other words, they are the beings who actually have some sense of control over what other beings have created. And you know who the boss is from that realm? That's right, Mara. So some of you may think that the Buddhist equivalent of the devil is some monster with horns and fangs and stuff, but he's actually a being of the highest heaven realm, and he has the most power next to the Buddha. So he's the chief of samsara, and that's why he has to make sure that all beings stay in samsara. That's his job. So as long as we're not practicing, we may never encounter Mara, because he can just rest at ease, knowing that we'll never get out. But as soon as we start practicing, we might encounter some form of Mara trying to keep us in line. Anyway, beyond that realm is the Brahma realm. And the reason it's called the Brahmacharya, you know what Brahmacharya is? For those of you keeping the 8 precepts, if you're chanting Brahmacharya Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami, I will refrain from any kind of sexual activity. So it's a better word is a purer abode where beings get reborn who are no longer exclusively deriving their happiness and pleasure from the realm of the 5 senses, but who are actually getting pleasure from the mind sense. So it's the realms that we take rebirth in when we have developed samadhi, jhanas, and one of the most powerful ways to get into jhanas is to develop the Brahma Vihara. So this word Brahma Vihara, you know the word Vihara, right? You know what the word Vihara means? Yeah, it means dwelling, or it means abiding. Yeah? Sometimes a temple is called a Vihara, right? So it's a place where you stay. Yeah? But it's also a place where we stay with our minds, with our hearts. There's a mental abiding, it's an abiding of the heart. So abiding in states of samadhi, states of inner calm, collectedness, is a pleasant abiding here and now. The Buddha called the samadhi states, the jhanas, a pleasant abiding here and now. So these pleasant abidings here and now are developed, as you know, in various ways. There's many different practices that the Buddha taught to develop samadhi, to develop jhanas. And one of the quite often taught effective way to attain samadhi is to liberate the mind through these intentions, deliberate intentions of wishing well, of compassion, of sympathetic joy and equanimity, just to give a short summary. So what we're talking about today are these four divine abidings, heavenly abidings, wholesome abidings, wholesome emotions, because they are emotions in the sense that they are things that come from the heart. Our intentions, our will is something that we generate in the heart. We generate the will, the intention, may I be well. May I be free from suffering. May I not be parted from the good fortune I have attained. May I abide in equanimity. May I just look on without liking and disliking. And may all beings be well. May all beings be free from suffering. May all beings not be parted from the good fortune they have attained. May all beings abide in equanimity, free from liking and disliking, just looking on. Upekha means literally just to look on peacefully, to actually see without being involved through liking or disliking. So, when the Buddha taught these Brahmaviharas to the monks, he intended them to be a skillful means to develop jhanas, to develop samadhi. However, they can of course also be viewed as a means to channel our intentions in a wholesome way, and also to thereafter channel our actions in a wholesome way that are in line with these wholesome emotions. So to be practicing, developing, cultivating those Brahmaviharas, we should first of all know that they are always generated within our own hearts, and also generated first of all to ourselves. The classical sutta passage where the Buddha talks about the Brahmaviharas, there's a very important little phrase that sometimes is forgotten, which we recite when we chant the Brahmavihara chant. I'm not sure if you're doing it here. Metta Sahakatena, do you chant that sometimes? It's a very beautiful chant. It's not a very long one. It has a very beautiful rhythm, and it's the short version and explanation of those four Brahmaviharas. It's a well worth chant to learn to do, even on a Sunday morning or whenever you do chanting. It's a very beautiful little chant. And one of the phrases that gets repeated in that chant is to develop that intention, to cultivate that intention, to generate that intention to all, in other words, to all beings, as to myself. To all as to myself. And that's a very important part if we want to understand these Brahmaviharas, because we cannot give anything that we don't have. We cannot share anything that we don't have. So we have to have love, kindness, goodwill. We have to have this well-meaning for ourselves, first of all. We have to experience in our own hearts this will, this intention of wishing well towards ourselves. And it's only when we are well, when we feel well, when we have generated this intention within our own hearts and know the actual meaning of well-being, of well-meaning, of loving kindness, that we can then radiate this loving kindness out. So, trying to have loving kindness for the beings or people or beings around us, without first of all having that loving kindness for ourselves, is quite impossible. It's not possible. Just like you cannot share any of your wealth if you haven't got any wealth. So the loving kindness that you have towards yourself is the wealth in your own heart, of which you then decide to share with others. And so that's why this loving kindness meditation is something that we can both practice as a preliminary to our meditation. So in other words, in the beginning of the meditation, before, say, we settle on the breath or a mantra, or we can just do the loving kindness meditation throughout the session. That's of course good as well. But I find personally for myself that when I have a good meditation, or have had a good meditation, that I feel well. I have created well-being within my own heart through the practice of calming the mind, making the mind peaceful, making the mind joyful, happy and content. And then at the end of the meditation, I find it much easier to then share that goodness, share that state of well-being that I've created with all beings. So try both. Try to do it in the beginning of the meditation, which I actually do. I talk about a bit my own, not so much understanding, but my own practice, my own way of dealing with these, maybe a bit later on. So I want to just say a few general, thank you, things about those qualities, just to bring them a bit closer to home, as it were. So first of all, like I said, we need to understand that it is an intention. It's not so much a feeling that we create, although of course calling it a divine or a wholesome emotion tends to lead us to the fact that that's the most important aspect. But the quality of heart, or the feeling that is generated, or the emotion that is generated, is actually a result of the intention that we generate in the heart. So it is this will, or this intention of wanting yourself to be happy, wishing yourself to be well. It's an intention. And that intention, because it's a wholesome intention, remember the Eightfold Path has intention as a very important factor, right intention, sometimes translated as right thought, or we had another word the other day, right, anybody remember? Yeah, right intention, but there was another one. Huh? Right resolve, I think it was. Yeah, right resolve, right intention, right thought. Samma sankappa, that second factor of the Eightfold Path, is in fact a synonym for the word vitakka. Those of you who know a little bit about the factors of jhana, vitakka, vichara, those initial and sustained application of the mind, this work of the mind that keeps the mind on the object when we practice meditation, whether it's with regard to the breath or whatever. This vitakka, in the coarse form, is actually thinking. So in general, ordinary terms, the word vitakka is used for thinking. That's why quite often they wrongly translate the jhana factors as thinking and pondering, as if in the first jhana there was still any thinking. Of course, in the first jhana there's no more thinking. Thinking has long since gone. Yeah? But there is still this intention, still this movement of the mind, still this directing the mind towards the meditation object. And that's called vitakka. And vichara is holding the attention there. Vitakka is taking it there, vichara is holding it there. So it's this movement of the mind that keeps the mind on the object. And in the course form, when we think and talk together, it's thinking and deliberating, reflecting, those kind of things. And sankappa, the second factor of the Eightfold Path, is a synonym for that. So that's why I actually like the translation of right thought. But of course, right intention is also not wrong, in the sense that thought is, of course, originating in the mind as a form of intention. And so when we talk about right intention, if you remember in the Eightfold Path, one of the right intentions is the intention of loving kindness, the intention of compassion, and the intention of renunciation. So giving up, letting go, renouncing is one of the right intentions, and then the loving kindness and compassion are the other two. But they're usually talked in the negative sense, so it's like non-ill will, non-cruelty, and non-sensuality. These are usually the three words that are used for what the Buddha defines as right intention or right thought. So if you understand these kind of connections, then you get a better idea of how to generate any of these Brahmaviharas. You need to use your thought, your deliberation, your vitakka, vichara, your sankappa, your intention, in order to will this state into being, to have the intention. And it's a pure intention, it's a wholesome intention, it's an intention that is well-meaning, that is wishing for the absence of suffering in other people, wishing that they may not be parted from the good fortune they have attained. In other words, you rejoice in the goodness of other people, in the goodness that they have developed or are experiencing. In other words, it's the direct opposite. The third Brahma Vihara is the direct opposite of envy. And then lastly, the intention of equanimity. So we need to really be working with these intentions at a time where we ourselves feel good, where we have a sense of ease, where we are in a place, in a space where we feel good, where we can cultivate and develop and generate this well-being. Sometimes people think, well, this loving kindness is sort of an antidote to anger, so whenever I get angry, I just practice loving kindness and all will be good. Of course, it doesn't work that way. Because once you're already angry, somebody's getting on your nerves or saying something bad or doing something terrible to you, then there's no way that you can all of a sudden just generate the intention of well-being, because you haven't cultivated. You've done your homework. So don't be fooled by thinking that in a state of emergency you can all of a sudden concoct this intention of well-being. You won't be able to. The power of anger in that kind of state is far too strong if you haven't really cultivated it at a time when you yourself were at ease, when you're at peace. So when you're at home, perhaps you have some time alone, just closing the eyes and just using your mind, using the thought, using the will, the intention of your heart to wish yourself well. Sometimes we can use other techniques, but wishing yourself well Yeah, sometimes is a very, very powerful way of calming yourself down, of becoming peaceful, of letting go of all the things that have been roaming around in your mind. It's a very effective way to quell the thinking mind, the nagging mind, the complaining mind, the fault-finding mind. It's a very, very beautiful way. So you close your eyes and you focus on your heart and you wish, oh, may I be well, may I be happy, may I be well, may I be happy. And then you can feel in the heart there's a feeling or an emotion, because we called it an emotion. There's an emotion that is welling up within your heart, a sense of warmth, or in Singapore, more likely a sense of coolness. In Germany, it's more like the warmth that you're after. But you can feel a sensation in your heart, you can feel an emotion in your heart, because it's a heartfelt emotion, isn't it? An emotion is always something that is felt in the heart. It's not something you feel in your brain or in your feet. It's something you feel in your heart. So using, and this is also for those people who are on the retreat, and we've been talking about the various sensations that we can use in conjunction with the breath meditation. Maybe I'll just say a little bit about how I find it very effective, because there's so many different ways. If you go around different teachers, different traditions, then loving kindness meditation is, because it's so, for want of a better word, popular, that many techniques have probably been developed over the years, some in conjunction with the commentarial tradition, some with practices that individual teachers have cultivated or developed and found useful for themselves. So many different techniques, and you would have probably heard of some of them. You know, one of them is where you can deliberately think of all the people, and you wish this person well and that person well, and your mum and your dad and your sister and your brother and your uncle and your auntie and who knows who else. So you're thinking of all these people and you start wishing them well. And if that works for you, great. I mean, go for it. That's, you know, whatever works is good. That's the kind of gist of it. But for myself, it never really worked that way. I'm a simple person, and I like to keep it simple. And I just like to work with, something that is a bit more direct. And for me, because I have been using the breath as my main kammatthana, as my main meditation object, and I found that over the years the breath is, in a sense, a bridge between the heart and the body, between the mind and the body. It's like the quality of the breath reflects the quality of your mind. The state of your breath reflects the state of your mind. If you feel calm, the more peaceful you become, the more refined and subtle and peaceful also the breath will become, to the point where it eventually disappears from your perception in meditation. When you watch the breath, it becomes so fine, so subtle that you can no longer detect it as a physical object. And so the breath then has, for me, always been, I like to call it a vehicle that can carry things like intention or emotion. I can deliberately direct my breathing to certain parts of the body, as we've been talking about on the retreat. I can deliberately breathe into parts of the body or out of parts of the body, thereby oxygenating and relaxing the body. And so using the breath in conjunction with this intention and the fact that these emotions are situated in the heart, for me always worked. So I'm a fan of mantras anyway. I recommend to any of you who have not yet had success with this pure breath meditation, because you found your mind is still prone to wandering and restlessness and thinking and just running wild, to use a mantra, a two-syllable word in conjunction with the breath. There's nothing wrong with that. Great Kubachans in the forest tradition have used the word Buddho or Dhammo or Sangho or Kesa, Loma, Naka, Danta, Tacho, the five body parts, hair, the head, hair, the body, nails, teeth, skin. Anything, any two-syllable word lends itself beautifully. I use the word just now, breathing in just, out now, just to get into the present moment. Just to use a word which has a meaning that is inspiring, that is conducive to what I'm trying to do, and use that in conjunction with the breath. And I do the same thing with the Brahmaviharas. And because I also speak a bit of Thai, and the Thai language is quite simple and quite direct, I use the word metta chit, which literally means a heart full of loving kindness, or with a heart of loving kindness. So if you don't like the Thai, you can use the Pali, which is actually metta cittena. Cittena is like with a heart of loving kindness. Metta, chitta is the heart, you know that? The chitta, or in Thai the chit. And cittena is the grammatical ending for with a heart of loving kindness. Or you can make up your own words, of course, it doesn't really matter. But for me, it's like I repeat when I breathe in, I repeat metta, metta chit. And I breathe into my heart, and I try to generate that intention of well-being for myself. And then when I breathe out, I'm just silent. Just breathe out and try to generate loving kindness outwards. And just on the in-breath, breathing into my heart, metta, metta chit. And then breathing out from the heart, generating loving kindness. And so you're using this word metta as a mantra, which, because you keep repeating it, and in most of those metta traditions or teachings, you are supposed to be using thought anyway to generate that goodwill. So you're using that goodwill in a form of a mantra, in a very simple, very direct, very clear and precise way, where you just direct your attention to the heart, using the words, a heart full of loving kindness, a heart full of loving kindness, a heart full of loving kindness. And then when you're breathing out, you're just trying to generate that loving kindness for yourself. And then once you feel that developing in the heart, that loving kindness, that goodwill, then you can generate that outwards and wish well to all beings, or to any being in particular. Sometimes you feel that you need to generate loving kindness towards a particular person, or sometimes it's just wishing all beings to be well. You want to share the happiness that you've achieved yourself, or the calm, the peace, the contentment, the joy that you've generated in your own heart. You want to share that with others. And so the loving kindness is, of those four Brahmaviharas, a rather more general intention. So to wish well to yourself, or to wish well to others, is quite broad. It encompasses any form of well-being. It doesn't mean physical. It doesn't mean specifically mental. It doesn't go into details. It doesn't require anything other than this intention of wishing well. However that manifests to you. What does it mean to you? See, and this is what we need to find out. What does it mean? To generate an intention, you need to find out, what is it? What does it actually mean to wish well? And that's why you need to wish well to yourself first, so that you find out what it actually means to really wish yourself well. Yeah? And it's only then, when you know in your own heart what it means to wish yourself well, that you can actually effectively wish well to others. Otherwise, it's just like being a parrot. Male beings beware, male beings beware, male beings beware. It doesn't mean anything. Yeah? You can repeat that 100,000 times. You need to experience it in your own heart, first of all. Yeah? What it means to really wish well. And there's another component which is sometimes talked about, which might be useful to just mention. Because one of the reasons that some teachers teach that you have to wish others well first, which actually goes against that little sutta where the Buddha says, to all as to ourselves. But they find it useful to teach that way because they have experienced that some people have difficulties wishing themselves well. They find it easy to wish their girlfriend well. Or their boyfriend, which is, of course, it's not the point, really. So to do that, you can do that, but it's in a sense is counterproductive. So what I just thought of is this idea of questioning why it is so difficult to wish ourselves well. Yeah? And sometimes we need to actually forgive ourselves. So this forgiveness towards ourselves for anything that we may have done intentionally or unintentionally through body, speech or mind that has hurt or harmed anybody, including ourselves, that we ask for forgiveness. And we give forgiveness. We give ourselves forgiveness. We can ask ourselves for forgiveness, but then we have to give ourselves forgiveness as well. Yeah? And so, if you really find that difficult to wish yourself well, then sometimes it's good to investigate and ask yourself why. Why am I finding it so difficult to love myself? Why do I find it difficult to wish myself well? Why do I even hate myself? Or why am I unhappy or discontent with myself? And then you need to find out, well, what have I done on the level of sila, on my ethical conduct? What have I done that justifies not being able to wish myself well? And then if you find out what that was, or what that is, then to deliberately ask yourself for forgiveness, and then give yourself forgiveness, and then try again. And you find that is incredibly effective, incredibly helpful, because I was saying on the retreat the other day that the job of the kilesa, the job of the defilements of greed, hatred and delusion, who've been reigning over our mind for countless lifetimes, is to discourage us, is to always put us down, is always to pull us down, to make us feel inadequate, to make us feel bad, to make us feel dirty or whatever. Yeah? So investigating that, looking at the causes and the conditions that are behind this is very important, because the wisdom part of our practice is not something that we wait to develop until we've attained the fourth jhana. I mean, you probably never develop wisdom. So we need to develop this wisdom along the way, all the time. Yeah? Whenever something doesn't work, whenever we have a problem with any aspect of our practice, the question needs to be why. What's the problem? Yeah? Why do I have a problem wishing myself well? Why do I have a problem to love myself? To just embrace myself. I sometimes in my mind, just imagining, just hugging myself, and just forgiving myself and giving myself the benefit of the doubt, and then wishing myself well. And once that forgiveness is given, and once that intention of loving kindness is generated, there's this huge relief, this huge burden that falls from our shoulders, and there's a sense of ease, a sense of calm, a sense of lightness, a sense of freedom that comes with that. And so generating that loving kindness towards yourself is just incredibly important. But then of course, it's also then part of any practitioner to share that with others. The Brahmaviharas, because they're quite diverse, and I'll talk about the others in a moment, sometimes we kind of look at teachers or people around us who've been practicing for a long time, and we can detect certain qualities or a certain one of these four emotions to be seemingly predominant in that person. Any of you who have met Lumpa Liam would know that this is personified equanimity. Or if you've met someone like Lumpa Tongdang, is this blob of metta, it's just melts your heart just even looking at him. Or others, the compassion aspect just kind of prevails and stands in the fore and just really stands out in that person. So, but the reason I'm saying that is because in the Arahat, in the fully enlightened one, those four Brahmaviharas are perfectly balanced. Which, again, still it doesn't mean that not one of these qualities can stand out in front. But it doesn't mean that he doesn't have the others. You see what I'm trying to say? It's like they're all there. Like an enlightened being has all these four Brahmaviharas perfectly developed in their heart. But because of character, because of idiosyncrasies, because of character differences, what comes to the fore is one quality seemingly predominating over the other. But it doesn't mean that someone like Lumpa Liam doesn't have metta, even though he sits there and he just chui. He seems to be always equanimous. But it doesn't mean that underneath there is no loving kindness or compassion or sympathetic joy. Qualities are also there. Because remember, it is only the Buddha himself who abandons the vasana. The word vasana, sometimes it's good to learn some of these Pali words. Vasana are the qualities that make an individual an individual. It's like the personal qualities. Say if you grew up on fish and chips as a child, then even if you're an arahat, you probably still like fish and chips. Something Ajahn Brahm would probably say. Or if you like telling jokes, or if you whatever predisposition you have, whatever idiosyncrasies you have, those idiosyncrasies will stick with you even as an arahat. But they're not motivated, they're not generated by defilement anymore. They're not coming from greed, hatred, delusion, or fear. So they're no longer defiled idiosyncrasies, but they're still idiosyncrasies. And it's only a Buddha who has no more idiosyncrasies. A Buddha is completely neutral. So even the Arahat has still these individual character traits that stand out, and that's why we can find in those great beings that sometimes one of the four of these four Brahmaviharas will stand out more than the other. But I just wanted to say that to make that clear, that an enlightened heart has all these four Brahmaviharas perfectly developed. So, okay, so I said that the first one, the loving kindness, is the most general one. Going now to compassion, it is a slightly different angle, because in order to have compassion, we need to first of all recognize the suffering in other people. So it's a different approach. Yeah? To wish well, you can just sit there and wish well. It's a general wishing well. But to wish, may I be free from suffering, I have to first of all recognize the fact that I'm actually suffering. Or if I want to wish other people, may they be free from suffering, I have to first of all look at their suffering. Yeah? So it's a different approach, it's a different mental attitude, it's a different way of directing the mind. We need to first direct our mind to the suffering in our own hearts, and to the suffering in the hearts of other beings, before we can generate that intention. Again, it's an intention, may I be free from suffering. So you look at your own heart, and you, or what I do is I breathe in, I breathe into my heart, may I be free from suffering. May I be free from suffering. I don't use that word as a mantra so much, because I use this, the metta, more, so I haven't got a mantra there, but whatever works really is good. But the point is that you want to recognize your own suffering first. And here we can see why it is that a person who has seen the Dhamma has an infinitely different possibility to generate both loving kindness as well as compassion, and the other too. Why? Why does at least a stream enterer have a better means of generating compassion? What do you think? What does the Sotapanna know that we don't know? Not so fast. 2 steps before. Oh, sorry, 1 step before. Okay, anicca, dukkha, anatta. Anicca, dukkha, anatta. The stream enterer has seen impermanence, suffering, and non-self. But what he's seen is suffering. In terms of the Four Noble Truths, the Sotapanna has seen this is suffering, all of this. And there's a cause for suffering. And there's an end to suffering, and there's a way leading to the end of suffering. So Sotapanna has seen and understood the Four Noble Truths, the fundamental teaching of the Buddha. So someone who has actually seen suffering, of course, has a completely different means to wish, may other beings or may I myself be free from suffering, because he actually knows what suffering is. We don't know what suffering is. I mean, we may know that somebody knocks you on the thumb with a hammer, that it hurts, but that's not necessarily the suffering the Buddha is talking about. There's different degrees and different levels of suffering. Suffering is all-inclusive. Yeah? All-embracive. So someone who has seen suffering, who knows how deep that suffering runs in all beings, it's something that goes to the core, to the marrow, it's something that is there all the time. Even if we're happy, we're still suffering. on that subtle level that the Buddha is talking about. Now, we're not talking about physical pain, we're talking about the unsatisfactoriness, the conditioned nature of existence, the fact that everything is uncertain, the fact that birth, old age, sickness and death, birth, old age, sickness and death, birth, old age, sickness and death, ad infinitum are going on forever. Yeah? So someone who has seen that, who's really comprehended the Four Noble Truths, if someone like that generates the intention of may I be free from suffering, or may all beings be free from suffering, is a completely different ball game. It's infinitely more powerful than if a puthujjana, say an unenlightened being, generates that kind of intention. It's still meaningful, it's still worthwhile, it's still productive and conducive to our practice, and I'm not saying any otherwise, but I'm just trying to make the point why the presence of an enlightened being is such a powerful thing. Any of you who have met beings who have developed the path to any significant level would have experienced, if you have any sensitivity, the kind of purity and the kind of power that is generated by their minds, by their hearts. It's a completely different realm. That's why it's called superior human. It's above the usual ordinary worldly experience that we all share. So compassion is, like I said, a slightly different approach. It takes a bit more mental work. It takes a bit more courage even, perhaps, because we need to first of all look at dukkha. Sometimes we don't want to look at dukkha, we don't want to look at suffering. So metta seems sort of, seems a bit more easy. Yeah. It's compassion, I don't really want to look at suffering, it's just, nah. But it's good, because like Luang Por Chah always used to say, if you don't look at suffering, you'll never see it. If you never see it, you never contemplate it. If you never contemplate it, you never understand it. If you never understand it, you'll never be free from it. So don't be afraid of looking at suffering. As dukkha, the perception of dukkha is a blessing. The Buddha said, to see that is a blessing, because it rouses a sense of urgency. I was talking about the four holy sites in India, and going to India. It's like these places, they rouse a sense of urgency. This is where the Buddha was born, this is where the Buddha became enlightened, this is where the Buddha taught this amazing teaching for the first time. This is where the Buddha finally laid down the khandhas, finally became free. Not that he wasn't free before, but this drag of the five khandhas finally put it down. So, dukkha is something that, when looked at in a wise way, generates this sense of urgency, and it generates a sense of faith. There is a very beautiful teaching, I think it's in the Anguttara Nikaya, for those who like the suttas, where the Buddha says, from looking at suffering with wisdom springs faith. And if you just even think about it for a moment, it makes a lot of sense. Because if you really look at suffering, you see suffering, you're looking for a way out. So there arises this faith that maybe there is a way out. And maybe this is the way out of suffering. So faith is generated in the heart when we actually look at dukkha in the right way. If we look at it in the wrong way, then we get all kind of depressed and, I don't want to look at suffering, too much suffering in the world, Look at it in the wise way. It's actually the first noble truth. It teaches you something. And then if you get some inkling of how deep this suffering runs, if you then try to generate compassion, it's so much more effective, because you really know what all these beings are going through. Now, we're all brothers and sisters in old age, sickness and death. We're all in the same boat. We may be all totally different idiosyncrasies, totally different views and opinions, ideas, understandings, defilements. But hey, in the sense of old age, sickness and death, and birth, we're all in the same boat. So seeing that gives us a foundation for really generating this compassion in a meaningful way. This intention of, may I be free from this misery, this suffering, this thorn in my heart. It's like a thorn that is stuck in my heart. May I be free from that. And then you keep repeating that again as a mantra. May I be free from suffering, may I be free from suffering, until you actually grasp what this intention really means. Because again, it's an intention. It's not just trying to develop some wishy-washy happy feeling in the heart. No, it's this intention. It's cetana. It's a very fundamental way of directing our mind, our heart. It's an intention. Remember, the Buddha said cetana is kamma. Cetana, intention, is kamma. That's why any action that is not based in intention is not kamma. If I go like that, and there was a mosquito, but I just wanted to scratch myself, then that's an action. It's a physical action, and the mosquito is dead. Too bad. But I didn't want to kill it. But if I go like that, then of course the intention is pretty clear. So that's what intention is kamma. So these Brahmaviharas are very powerful kamma. And we're creating kamma by generating this intention of well-being, this intention of loving kindness, this intention of compassion. And we get an understanding what cetana actually is. Because in order to understand our minds, in order to understand our thinking, our way of thinking, what makes us tick, we need to understand where intention is coming from, where intention is generated. We need to understand what intention actually is. Because sometimes we're not clear, we're not aware of our intentions, because we're running on automatic most of the time. But there are always intentions behind our actions. There are always intentions behind the action, but we're too dull, too stupid, too kind of blurred to really know why we are acting in this particular way. There's an intention at the root of this action. So by deliberately generating wholesome intentions, we actually learn about intention itself. And thereby we can understand our whole thought process, our whole way of speaking and acting, which is all based in our intentions, which again is sankappa, the second factor of the Eightfold Path. Right thought, right action, right mental action, if you like. So compassion is something that again is sort of like it's like expected of us, isn't it, from Buddhists? So we're supposed to be compassionate. But to really understand compassion, we need to understand intention, and we need to understand suffering. They go together. If you understand suffering, you understand the intention of wishing yourself to be free from that suffering because you actually seen suffering, then you also have a good means to really be compassionate. Compassion goes a lot deeper than if we just kind of superficially do it almost as a ritual, because we think that as Buddhists we're supposed to be compassionate. So really going to the root, looking to the root of where these intentions come from, how to generate them, it can be very, very helpful, and productive, and effective. So the next one then is sympathetic joy, and like I said in the summary in the beginning, sympathetic joy is the opposite of envy, because what you're doing there is you rejoice in something that someone else has attained. You are happy for someone else because of their attainment, be it a material gain, or be it a spiritual attainment, or be it an attainment, an achievement of any kind. Someone gets a reward. I mean, it could be any kind of worldly, a silly gain. If we rejoice and feel happy for them that they have achieved something, then already that is, in a sense, a form of practicing sympathetic joy, which is a countermeasure, a counter agent for envy. And a lot of envy is produced in our current society because of all the competition and the fast pace at which our society runs, and the kind of backstabbing and elbowing and getting your own and trying to get ahead, which is something that is promoted in the world. Any kind of world that runs on this sort of capitalist principle, whether it's Germany or Singapore or the United States or China, it doesn't really matter. They're all promoting this sense of envy and jealousy through that competition that is generated. And so sympathetic joy, even on that very worldly level, is something that can really help us to mellow out, to not buy in to this ugly way of pushing other people aside and always putting ourselves in the front and developing this sense of self-importance. It doesn't mean that we don't work hard to achieve things, but it doesn't mean that we need to do that at the expense of other people. We can still rejoice in other people acquiring equal amounts of wealth or goodness in the world. So as Buddhists, it's very imperative that we use this third Brahmavihara as well as a means to survive in this world as Buddhists. Because if we don't, then even as Buddhists, we just go under. We just get swept away by this wave of greed and envy and jealousy and competition that is sweeping over the world. It's something that is there for all of us to see. All we need to do is really just open our eyes and ears. It's right in front of our faces. But because we have to live in this world, that sometimes we tend to look away, or we tend to not want to really see what's going on, because we have to somehow justify our own existence. We have to justify our own ways of playing along this ugly game, because we don't really see another possibility. If we want to somehow maintain the lifestyle that perhaps we've become accustomed to. And so in our hearts, in our minds, then it becomes imperative that we really develop this sense of sympathetic joy, where we can deliberately generate the intention of rejoicing in the goodness that other people acquire. And of course it doesn't just pertain to the material, but also to the spiritual. Like I remember whenever I heard of someone getting a good meditation, or experiencing any insight, or just getting ahead on the path, it was always a sense of great joy for myself, because I never thought of myself as a particularly envious or jealous person. I admit, when I had a girlfriend, I was jealous. But I think that's excusable. Or maybe not. Yeah, just even thinking about it now, I just didn't think about it forever, but just even while it comes back to mind, the question of course arises, well, why was I jealous? Yeah? Jealousy is a sense of inadequacy. We feel ourselves inadequate, and we have this fear that someone else is better. Yeah? And in the end, of course, someone else was better, because she ran away with someone else. So maybe my jealousy was justified. So who knows? But I could still wish her well in retrospect. So may she be well. Now she's fat and happy, and she has a child, and so married. So yeah, it's funny though, when you go back to I go back to Germany. I look at my old friends, and also my old girlfriends. They're all middle-aged housewives now, put on 30, 40 kilos, and raised a few children. You kind of go. Great, what the Tathagata has prevented us from. Yeah, so I love this third Brahma Vihara. It's one that's not actually that often taught. People don't seem to, they make a lot of metta, of course, and compassion on a superficial level, but then that sympathetic joy, it just runs so deep. They all run deep, but it's like, if you can actually, just sit there and, really wish, just really generate this intention of being happy for someone else, this God, may they be successful, it's like, may they prosper, may they not be parted from the good fortune that they have attained. You really rejoice in the achievement of others. It really cuts again at this root of jealousy and envy, and it's very, very powerful mental attitude to develop, and it gives us so much joy, it gives us so much happiness, because it's like something, it's the kind of quality that it sort of puts a smile to my face, in the sense that it almost like it becomes a relief to realize that you don't actually need to be jealous or envious of anybody. Quite the opposite. You actually get more happiness and more contentment and more peace of mind by allowing everybody else to be happy as. It's perfectly okay. Yeah? And sometimes I do that when people come to the monastery, and or even say in the context of this meditation retreat. Now I briefly said that, although not quite in that context, at the beginning of the retreat. I really have a lot of respect for people in Singapore when they're able to tuck away, like even just now, 4 days of their time, their precious time, to come and do a meditation retreat. Yeah? And it used to be like 10-day retreats, and they're more rare these days. But I remember the first few retreats I taught were actually 10-day retreats in Singapore. And for me, that was an incredible source of mudita and this sympathetic joy, because I really rejoice in the fact that they were willing to sacrifice 10 days of their precious holidays, of which they don't have very many, to come to do a meditation retreat. So I deliberately used that way of thinking to generate happiness in my own heart, because I felt happy for them. I felt good, and that's why I've been coming back since, because I really respect that. There's a lot of devotion, a lot of faith, a lot of interest, and willingness to cultivate the Dhamma. Yeah, in a world that is, like I said, incredibly fast-paced. Yeah, it's like a lot of people have sort of high-powered jobs. They do have quite stressful jobs, and they could just as well go and, take a plane and lay on the beach somewhere, or sit in a pub and get drunk, or whatever, And so I rejoice in that, and that rejoice is a sense of mudita, is a quality of developing sympathetic joy. You're rejoicing in the goodness of other people. Or people come to the monastery in Germany. Sometimes because we're quite remote. You have to make quite a bit of considerable effort to get there, because it's not that easily accessible. It's not difficult, but it takes some effort. Some people, they just to listen to a Dhamma talk on a Saturday night, sometimes they drive a couple 100 kilometers. Or to offer dana on a Sunday, they may drive an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours or something like that, and all these kind of things. Or sometimes on a meditation retreat, people talk about their good experiences. They're experiencing some calm, peace and happiness, and rejoicing in that, feeling happy for them. So that is something that really I can encourage. I mean, I encourage all of these Brahmaviharas, but this sympathetic joy, because it's not so often taught, and it's not so in the fore, that I really encourage people to get acquainted with that and try and develop that, and see how much that can actually generate a countermeasure towards the kind of greed and jealousy and envy that is sometimes promoted in our world, sadly. That's a very good quality to develop. Just looking at the clock, I'm running a bit late, but doesn't matter. So I might go on to this last one of equanimity before I talk about it a bit in the context of developing meditation. Equanimity, upeka, literally means looking on. I said that in the beginning. And it's a very important thing to remember, because equanimity, the reason we call it equanimity is because we're focusing on the fact that we put away liking and disliking. Equanimity means that the heart, the mind is balanced. The heart is neutral. There's no liking and no disliking, no wanting and no not wanting. But that is only a prerequisite for being able to look on. The last factor of the 7 factors of enlightenment is upekkha. And the reason is because at that stage you can really look on. You can really look, and because you can really look, you can really see. Before you couldn't see. You can look, but you couldn't see. The reason you can look but you don't see is because there is always liking or disliking. Now you want, now you don't. Now you like, now you don't. This I like, this I don't. This I want, this I don't. It's something that is tearing away at our hearts 24 hours a day. Liking and disliking. If we don't like it, we dislike it. If we don't dislike it, we like it. There's always wanting and not wanting. And to arrive at a state of mind where there is truly no liking and disliking means that we have arrived at a state where we can truly look on. Pekati means just to look. Upekkha means to look on. Sometimes they call it look on with equanimity, which is actually doubling it. Because upekkha already means looking on with equanimity. Yeah. So, how then do we generate an intention of equanimity? It seems really difficult, doesn't it? Yeah, because, I mean, how can we will, or how can we generate the intention of not liking and not disliking? I mean, if we could just do that, we'd probably be enlightened already. Yeah. So it seems quite difficult to do, and in fact it is. It's probably the most difficult of the 4. In the Dhamma, equanimity in most cases is a result of the practice. Any state of samadhi is accompanied by equanimity. The highest form of equanimity is in the 4th jhana. There's no higher form of equanimity than the equanimity of the 4th jhana, because in the 4th jhana you can truly look on without happiness, without suffering to disturb you. There's no more happiness, there's no more suffering. There's just looking on with perfect mindfulness. That's the quality of the 4th jhana. And so, to generate this intention of equanimity, I find it, again, useful to use a mantra, again in conjunction with the breath, breathing into the heart. And the words I use, again, is the Thai, Gert, Dap. Gert, Dap. Gert, Dap. Anybody speak Thai? No? What's Gert? Yeah? What's Dap? Yeah. So it means arising and passing away. What comes, goes. If you want to use an English equivalent, what comes, goes. What comes, goes. What comes, goes. What arises, passes away. What is born, dies. What is born, dies. What is born, dies. Birth, death, birth, death, birth, death. Arising and ceasing, arising and ceasing, arising and ceasing. Because if you understand the nature of all formations, being that whatever is of the nature to arise, that is of the nature to cease. Whatever is conditioned of the nature to arise is of the nature to cease. Conditions arise, conditions cease. There is no condition that lasts forever. And this realization, even using it as a mantra, in whichever way you can come up with yourself, because you're using the words, you're focusing on the heart, you're using the breath as a bridge that conveys that meaning to your heart, you generate a sense of understanding of this truth, which in turn generates equanimity, because you are no longer interested in things that arise and cease. If you're truly no longer interested in things that arise and cease, you can look on with equanimity, because you don't want what arises and ceases, and you don't not want what arises and ceases. You don't care what arises and ceases, because it just arises and ceases. But you can see it's a tricky one, it's a difficult one, it's a very powerful one. It's the one that is getting us closer and closer to enlightenment, but it's one that is well worth playing with in our minds. Even if we don't get enlightened or arrive at perfect equanimity, it's something that we play with in our minds. It's something that we use to get closer to this profound Dhamma, to this profound truth, to this profound realization that the Sotapanna has. Yang kinchi samudaya dhammang sabbantang nirodha dhammanti. That's the first realization of Kondanya. Remember the Dhammacakka Pavattana Sutta? The Buddha behind me is symbolizing the first teaching of the Buddha, the Dhammacakka Sutta, where Kondanya became the first stream enterer in the dispensation, and thereby the Sangha was born. Before that there was no Sangha. Kondanya was the first. So when Kondanya realized that whatever is of the nature to rise, all that is of the nature to cease, he became a stream enterer. So using that as a means to generate equanimity, that intention of withdrawing our interest from the things that arise and pass away, where we then can just look on with equanimity. We can just watch, we can just look. And because we're really, really, really looking, we actually might see the truth. So equanimity is a result of the practice, but it is also a Brahma Vihara that we can cultivate. We can generate or produce this intention of looking on, this intention of taking away our interest from the things that arise and pass away. So if we take away the interest from liking and disliking, if we no longer like and no longer dislike, we can really begin to see. Otherwise, all we see is clouded by our defilements, is clouded by our wishes, by our desires, by our anxieties, by our hatred, by our envy, by our jealousy. All these states, all these defilements that are always an expression of either liking or disliking, just in different manifestations, they always cloud our seeing of the truth. So that's why equanimity is imperative and necessary to actually attain enlightenment. And so please also understand in that context that any state of samadhi, even the first jhana, even upajjhara samadhi, even just the presence of samvega, the sense of urgency or piti, along with that comes also a sense of equanimity. Why? Because if you come out of a powerful state of meditation, even if it was one that was where joy and happiness was at the center of that experience, in retrospect you feel also equanimous. Because you have experienced a happiness that is higher than the happiness of the world. And so that interest in the things of the world fades away through that powerful happiness that comes through the meditation. And that's why, after a good meditation, you are also equanimous with regard to the things that come and go. You couldn't care less what somebody says to you or does to you if you come out of a good meditation, because you feel good. You're happy, you're contented, you're equanimous. You've got something that is far better in here than anybody out there can offer. So equanimity is a result of our diligent practice of meditation, but it is also a powerful means to enhance and develop our meditation by using it in a way that we deliberately generate this intention of equanimity, this will to pull away from liking and disliking by understanding or turning to the fact that gert dap, whatever rises, ceases. So I use that as a mantra if I want to generate equanimity. If my mind goes towards something with too much attraction or too much aversion, immediately, it's almost like an automatic. My mind immediately repeats the mantra inside, gert dap, gert dap, gert dap, gert dap, gert dap. Sometimes with the breath, breathing in gert, breathing out dap, as a mantra. And sometimes I'm like, gert dap, gert dap, gert dap. Go away, leave me alone. Not interested. It doesn't always work, I tell you that. Be nice if it did, but sometimes the defilements are stronger. Yeah? But any time that the mind has some sense of peace and calm, contentment and happiness, then you should be able to generate these intentions to your advantage, whether it's the intention of loving kindness, the intention of wishing others, yourself first of all, to be free from suffering, whether it's the intention of rejoicing in the goodness of others, or whether it is the intention of equanimity. So I think we better stop, otherwise I won't get anything to eat today. I think noon is about
1.
I think the latest is 1:15. Anybody know what the exact noon is in Singapore at the time?
About 1 o'clock.
Is it 1 o'clock?
Yeah.
Not after?
1 or 1:10 around there.
Okay, I got half an hour, so let's end it here.
Yes. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. We'll do the end of service dedication by ourselves while Ajahn will take his alms bowl and get his food.